What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. So let's go ahead and introduce the panel. I think you know these two gentlemen very well by now. In fact, let's see here. If I can... Oh, no, actually, I don't know how to switch the screens. But... And that's Adonis. So we're going to start over. All right. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. So, of course, let's go ahead and introduce a couple gentlemen who probably don't need an introduction if you're watching this channel, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway because I like these guys a lot. So first, we're going to start off with the jack of all trades who has mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, who is also the senior editor of Shogun.com. How are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing really well. I can tell from hearing Adonis in the background that he and I have similar thoughts about 15 fight cards, but it wasn't that bad, little man.
Yeah. Expect him to be all up on the show again today. He's been lively all day long. So now, of course, the panel is anchored every week by the man with all the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers. He is the associate editor of Sherlock.com, my good friend Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about these 15 fight cards that were bestowed upon us because reasons. But at least we didn't have a 20 fight Bellator card, so good with the bad. But on the note of high numbers, the stat of the week is 30. 30. All 30 UFC fighters that have ever closed as a betting favorite over minus 1,000, that is over a 10-1 favorite, have won. All 30 have won when that high of a favorite. Now, as we know, Khamzat Chimaev, who is everybody's favorite title challenger, apparently, according to some people, came in at minus 1050. And he did what we expected he would do to Reese McKee in the opening round. So, yeah, 30 fighters, a favorite that high, have all won.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about the main event of Saturday night. Definitely wasn't a blowout as far as betting lines were concerned. It's kind of a pick 'em fight, and it ended up being a close affair. But Robert Whittaker wins a decision against Darren Till. So out of this 5-round fight, two gentlemen who have challenged for UFC titles, although I'd say Robert Whittaker, former champion. What did we learn about either one of these gentlemen?
I'll jump in. If anything, there were more questions hanging over the head of Robert Whittaker. You know, he hadn't fought since last September. He got blown out, lost his title. And in the months after that, he kind of disappeared from view, openly said that he had been feeling burnout, was questioning his motivation. So all kinds of questions hanging over his head. In fighting Till, I learned two things. One, his chin is still reliable because he walked into Darren Till's shiny new weapon, something that he clearly did some film study and his coaches drilled into him. If you can throw that little short intercepting elbow, Robert Whittaker is going to run right into it. He did at least twice, and he was little the worse for wear. So that is a good sign. Number two, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, but Robert Whittaker appeared to be enjoying himself before, during, and after this fight. In the immediate aftermath, they asked him about, they tried to get him to call somebody out. They tried to get him to plot his path back to the belt. And he just kind of gently demurred and said, I'm going to go home and enjoy this with my family. If that is the sound of a Robert Whittaker who is achieving some kind of work-life balance, that's good. The sport is better with Robert Whittaker in it. He is going to be in it for longer if he is winning fights and enjoying himself. So those are the things I learned.
What about you, Jay? What did you learn out of that main event?
It's kind of funny because I came into this fight expecting we're going to get something new out of Darren Till. We're going to get, can he rise to the level of Robert Whittaker? Because he kind of sort of beat Kelvin Gastelum / nullified him more than anything, kind of shut Kelvin down to take that narrow decision. So this performance was something I was expecting to get something from Till, and I didn't. I didn't get anything new other than he learned a new particular weapon from film study or wherever he picked it up of his little check elbow, which reminds me of Donald Cerrone would have that little short check knee to come in to catch guys when they're going to shoot in on him. Caught Ali Quinter with it, caught Alex Hernandez with it. And so Darren Till is the Darren Till we kind of thought he can hang, but is he going to get that far? No. But Whittaker, I think we learned a lot about Whittaker. I think we got out of him the joyful dark side we had kind of wondered, because his post-fight interview where he was asked about Darren Till, now he scored a lot of leg kicks during the fight, which he started doing from the Yoel Romero fight, the second Yoel Romero fight, and he hurt Darren Till's leg. You could hear Darren Till between rounds to his corner saying, yeah, I can't put any weight on this thing. And he shredded Till's leg is what happened. Till's getting surgery. So a journalist asks Whittaker his thoughts on that, and he kind of smiled, and he like, oh, well, that's what are you going to do? Just kind of enjoyed it. So this is a different Robert Whittaker. And I'm curious how far this Robert Whittaker 2.0, 3.0, 3.0 probably, because he had the welterweight thing, can go. But I'm really curious how he'll stand up against, I don't want to say an actual middleweight because Darren Till is enormous, but another top contender type. Like, I want to see him fight Jared Cannonier. Okay. Something like that.
I definitely think we did learn some things about both gentlemen. For Whittaker, I think, granted, he did get the win, and he looked pretty sharp throughout the majority of the fight. But I think we're seeing the cracks of that armor. There was a point in the very recent past where Robert Whittaker at middleweight was thought to be unbeatable.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of all-time great talk was, centered around that man.
Yep.
Now we saw some of the same bad habits that got him floored against Adesanya pop up in this Till fight. A lot of the lunging punches. I mean, he's going out with his chin first. I mean, that's how he kept getting caught with that elbow, because he's leading with his chin. So yeah, we hear what Adonis has to say about. He
disagrees with that style of fighting.
He definitely disagrees with me there. But then also too, I think for Darren Till, I mean, we learned that he still has some of the same weaknesses that plagued him at 170, namely his ground game. There was a point or two in that fight where he looked completely clueless on the floor. And granted, while Robert Whittaker is in my estimation an underrated grappler, he's certainly not a guy who you would consider a threat on the ground necessarily. Mm-hmm. So I think Darren Till's going to run into some of the same problems that he had in a smaller weight class with a wrestler like a Tyron Woodley. So I think we're going to see some of the same flaws manifest themselves in bigger fights. Granted, though, these two are so close to the top of the division, either one of them could find themselves in a title shot with these flaws still out on the table, ready to be exploited at that time. So, good fight though. I definitely enjoyed myself watching it. Now we're going to move on to the segment Choose and Perish. So we're going to give you two options here. No matter how much you dislike the options, you got to pick one, or off with your head. So who should retire after a winning performance on Saturday? Shogun or Fabricio Werdum?
I will jump in. If I have to choose one or the other, and I have it on good authority that I do at peril of my own life, I'm going to say Shogun Rua. Difference is Rua is still hovering around the edges of the top 15 in the light heavyweight division against all odds, against all premature eulogies and funerals for his career. He's still hovering around. He doesn't have a whole lot more to prove. Fabricio Werdum, if he does go to Bellator from here, which I'm sure we'll discuss later, he doesn't need to go on a seniors tour. He doesn't need necessarily to go fight Congo and Mir and Fedor, like he's saying. He wins one fight, and they might as well slot him in for a title shot against Ryan Bader. The version of Werdum that we saw on Saturday is the second best heavyweight in Bellator right now. So yeah, farewell, Shogun.
Jay, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, because of the style these two guys fight. Werdum can do what he did to Gustafsson with his big lumbering oaf self, and he actually got the better of Gustafsson in a few striking exchanges, by the way, which I didn't think was going to happen because I didn't think that Gustafsson would be as concerned about the ground game and be afraid of the takedown and get it up top. But he did. Shogun's style is not a style that can carry him to 40 and beyond. He both he and Nogueira, I'll be the first to admit, I did not have high hopes about this trilogy match. I kind of thought, well, this is going to be a big bummer. But between two guys with a combined age of, I think it was 82, they put on a way more entertaining fight than I expected. They put on probably one of the best elder statesman style fights, if that's a thing now, that I can think of, just because it was competitive. It was back and forth. Both guys still had some of the things that made them great. And they had little flashes. They had a couple those little brawls from the first fight. They had those moments. But Shogun's style, and again, Shogun is 5-1-1 in his last 7 fights. His only loss is to Anthony Smith. He elbowed him and took him out. He's beating John Vellante. He beat Corey Anderson, by the way, and Little Nog twice in that stretch, and Tyson Pedro is Tyson Pedro. But the cliff, the wall that older fighters start to hit is, if it isn't already here, because some people may say he's very past his prime, will be approaching very quickly when he gets slotted against a Johnny Walker, a younger face puncher, a Misha Serkinov, a Nikita Krylov kind of type who just wants to hurt him. That Shogun will be like, oh, this is not a good idea. So I think Shogun, you won a trilogy against a legit borderline legend. Nicely done. Werdum, go have fun and do whatever you're going to do next.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on this one. If I had to choose one person to retire, it's going to be Shogun, simply because the way they fight. Fabricio Werdum, beyond, let's just throw this on the table. Both of these guys could leave the UFC, and Scott Coker would throw them some money, or Dave Feldman would throw them some money in BKFC. There are plenty of avenues for cash for both men if they decided to continue competing. Problem is with Shogun is that style of competition just is not going to age very well. As entertaining as that fight was Saturday, which more entertaining than it had any business being. They took a lot of damage between the two of them. They threw out a lot of hard shots and they absorbed just as many. So do you want to see a guy continuing to fight like that, which is the way Shogun has always fought? He's fought like that since Pride. To see him keep fighting like that going into his elder years, I don't think so. Fabricio Werdum, on the other hand, always has the ability to tap you out with minimal physical damage to either one of you. So sounds like that's a style that's going to age a lot better. And then if we're talking about potential big fights, let's just go ahead and roll this right into the swing and miss here. Fabricio Werdum's next fight is against Fedor Emelianenko. Swing or miss, Jay?
Swing. I'm swinging because Werdum has been saying that he not only that he specifically wants the Fedor fight, which that's an interesting thing to say heading into free agency, but he's been pretty vocal saying my UFC chapter is closed. I've done what I wanted to do. I'm good. Unless the UFC decides to throw him a bag of cash, which they're not really inclined to do lately, even though he did what they didn't want him to do, I'd say yes. Now, Werdum, the UFC has a tendency to take an old established name, a former champion, a tough personality, whoever it may be, a popular person, and jam a bunch of hard fights on the roster at them to end their career, to end their time in the UFC, to send them off with a string of losses, so no one's going to want them. Chris Cyborg is
Page.
It's a notable example of
Page.
Forcing somebody to who would match up Amanda Hebus against somebody leaving the UFC at the time. But Werdum didn't let that happen. He did the opposite of what the UFC. I could see that Dana's like, no, why? And this makes all the sense in the world. Werdum and Coker have had a relationship in the past. There's always money in the Bellator banana stand. Risen's hurting for cash right now, so I don't think they can spring for it. There's all of that working for it. And like Duffy said, Werdum will be the second best heavyweight on the roster. And then we'll have to see him fight Czech Congo. I'm still swinging.
You taking a swing at that one, Ben? Is Fedor gonna fight Werdum next?
I'm taking a swing with just like the single tear just rolling down my cheek because I don't know why they want to do Fedor like that. If like the version of Werdum that showed up on Saturday against any Fedor we've seen in the last couple of years, even though Fedor's record looks all right on paper, it's not going to be pretty.
But if it's the Werdum that fought Oleinik the fight before, I think it was this year, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When he fought Oleinik, if that Werdum, the unmotivated, I can't submit him version shows up, then Fedor will take his head off.
Possibly. It's I don't know.
Yeah,
like it's a fight that's we just don't really need. I mean,
over under on butt scoots.
I mean,
one.
Maybe we need that Overeem rubber match. I don't know.
Didn't we get that?
It just felt like they fought 3 times.
God, it did. I mean, because they got the majority decision thing, and
that second fight kind of dragged on. All right, yeah. So I'll go ahead and swing at this one as well. I think that seems to be the most logical option for Fabricio next. I know there was some talk about him fighting at ACA. I heard some talk about that, and I'm sure they can afford it. And of course, his manager Ali Abdelaziz has a relationship with that promotion. He's got ties to that region. He's hung out. He's on the Kadyrov press tour and all that other stuff too. So maybe that's a potential destination. But I think the name value of fighting Fedor again, or fighting Roy Nelson again, or Josh Barnett, or any one of the or the champion Ryan Bader, any of the one of the known heavyweights at Bellator, it just sounds better. It's just sexier, and on top of that, you get the prime North American TV placement. You can get the sponsorships on your trunks. Like you just have all the bells and whistles that may not necessarily come at an ACA in a promotion that while it may be big in that region, just doesn't have any sort of legs outside of it. So just a thought. I do think that Fedor and Fabricio, it seems too Bellator of a fight for Bellator not to do.
You said it, and that there's a fight that I did want you to speak into existence and you didn't. It wasn't the one we've been talking about. They fought in the same card before in Strikeforce. Werdum versus Barnett.
That's a fight.
Sign me up. That sounds actually entertaining. I mean, Barnett, I don't know how long he'll be suspended for. It may be for a while, so I don't know if that'll happen. But their styles, that could be fun. Okay, I'm in. I'm into that one.
But I mean, I guess another thing too we can keep in mind. I mean, Bellator has co-promoted with Rizin in the past. Japan isn't exactly known to be a place that's strict on drug testing. So you could, if they wanted to do some other partnership with Rizin for a New Year's Eve card, Fabricio versus Josh Barnett sounds about as good as on that card. So I'd be down to watch that and let them juice up whatever.
All you need to know about Rizin is that Crow Cop retired on a 10-fight winning streak.
10, the longest win streak of his career, by the way.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I had to shout that out because that's something of note.
All right, well, let's go ahead and keep things moving along here, because we do have a gentleman that we should discuss briefly. A man by the name of Khamzat Chimaev. I know I screwed that up. Somebody step in and pronounce it for me properly.
I want to hear Keith Schillen say it, actually.
No, you don't. I heard him say it about half dozen times in the post-fight show I did with him. He's pretty good with Brazilian names. The Russian ones, he chokes on them a little bit. So I'll throw it out there. Khamzat
President
Chimaev.
Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah.
Oh, did someone say that? Anybody
What about
say
him,
that?
though?
Oh,
Yeah, what
all
about
right.
Khamzat?
All right. So, is he going to be the UFC's next big thing?
They want him to be. This is not an accident what the UFC has decided to do here. By giving him that record, fighters beg and plead and just text Mick Maynard every single day to get a fight. And they're going to, by the way, this Chimaev guy, or Chimaev, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to make a mess on the microphone. Chimaev, there you go. He is being offered a fight at UFC 252. That'll be 3 fights in a month. Fighters can't get 3 fights in a year. This is not an accident, the way that the UFC is pushing this guy. And it's really tough to see because he's already become a meme fighting John the Welsh Wrecking Machine Phillips, who is a brawler, and Rhys McKee, who is a technical brawler. That they're from the UK region that don't have, historically not the greatest takedown defense. So these matchups are tailor-made for a guy that can set up the, what do they call it now, the Dagestani handcuff, where you scoot and tie the legs up. That has a different name in wrestling, but that's I guess what we're calling it now. When he goes up against somebody with takedown defense, okay, then we'll see what's going to happen. I want to see him fight Khamzat Chimaev, who fought earlier that night, because then but they probably won't make that because the 2 fighters from the region. But then we'll see, can he take somebody down that doesn't want to get taken down? But the way that this seems to me is the UFC sees this fighter as their Michael Venom Page, in that they can deliver him favorable matchups. He gets a gaudy record and can put him atop the fights over fights on cards where fights that he should win by a landslide. He was the second fight of his UFC career, which by the way started 10 days earlier, and he at one point was a 13-to-1 favorite. This guy that no one had ever heard of besides Tudor Leonte, myself, and a few other guys that work on Fight Finder that know Brave CF to have seen this guy before. Then now he's the hot shot. I don't know. I want to see him do well, but I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to see him develop the way that he should.
So, Ben, do you think that he can go far? Unmute.
I don't know. The first thing I'll say is I find it heartening that the UFC is putting this much logistical and promotional muscle behind a grappler.
Yeah,
This is the type of thing they typically do to a shiny new toy that is knocking people out.
Sage Northcutt.
Yeah, Sage Northcutt. And you couldn't get much more different than like Sage Northcutt, the shiny platinum tipped All-American, just kind of ingenue who comes from karate, versus this Chechen by way of Sweden who speaks pretty good English and mostly just does Khabib Nurmagomedov things, at double speed on not great opponents. And that's kind of the problem. I'm tapping the brakes here until I at least see him beat somebody that I know is UFC quality. And he has not done that yet. He's beaten John Phillips, who is probably on his way out, and Rhys McKee, who may turn out to be UFC material, but there's no guarantee he is. So, yeah, I want to see him fight a good fighter. It doesn't even have to be a top 10 or top 15 guy at this point. The people on Twitter saying they wanted to see him take on Kamaru Usman next are... And it was people who should know better. Not just random doofuses. Like, whether they think Chimaev is that good, or they hate Usman and they want to see him lose and they think this is the guy. It was people who should have known better. Let's let him at least beat somebody that is above 500 in the UFC with more than 5 fights, something like that. Let's see him fight a decent fighter, and go from there. I'm excited by what I see because I do like that style of fighting. I enjoy it very much. It's a style I want to see more of at the highest levels, but I don't know anything about this guy yet.
and I don't know if will we be able to, like, the UFC is plotting to put this guy, Dana was saying at the press conference, to put him on UFC 252, which takes place in 2 weeks. What is it, August 15th, August 13th? Very short amount of time, which means fighter not in training camp, fighter that's taking the fight on obviously extremely short notice, and travel and all the other issues that factor into it. It just doesn't have the makings of opponent that's going to be there for it. Like, is he going to fight a blown up lightweight? Like I suggested earlier today to Short Dog News editor Tristan Critchfield. What if they put him against Stevie Ray, a blown up lightweight, so that he can take out Scotland? So then in 3 fights he can take out Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, go around the UK and circle to take its way through that area.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on this. We just don't know enough about him yet. Like, and while it is cool to see a guy with these quick turnarounds, you know, at least according to my old coach, like you can't have these quick turnarounds and actually develop much as a fighter. You know, of course, you get experience and maybe you maintain a certain level of conditioning, but as far as improving your game from a technical standpoint, there's just no time to do that. He's not going to be learning, you know, nuances of kickboxing to throw in there if he's fighting every 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen. As cool as it is for his bank account, I really think that we in mixed martial arts have a very bad habit of just pushing people out to the forefront way too fast. You know, to have people who otherwise have very educated opinions and are critical thinkers in the sport, to start jumping out there talking about this guy is the next is a immediate title contender and all. Please get all the way the fuck up out of here with that. Please. Like, it makes no sense. Now, I do think it is good if the UFC has someone they're trying to build up like a Michael Venom Page, where you can just kind of pad their record with, you know, with tune-up fight after tune-up fight after tune-up fight, and until maybe you can cash out on a really big payday, some sort of really big event, and maybe they develop into a legitimate prospect or contender. That's fine. And I think the UFC needs more of that, but let's not confuse what we saw Saturday and what we saw 10 days before that and what we're probably going to see in about 2 weeks. This isn't the heir apparent to Kamaru Usman that we're witnessing. We're witnessing a prospect, a very, very green prospect who has potential, but one way to squander that potential is by throwing you into matchups that you're not quite ready for, and just throwing you through the meat grinder. And that's a strong possibility. That's something that can happen. I mean, we saw this with Sage Northcutt, short notice fight against Brian Barberena. We saw this before. You don't want to do this, and I'd like to see the UFC take a slow and steady approach with this gentleman as well.
And you know, historically, unfortunately, it has been a UFC marketing tactic to say X new fighter, X young hotshot is the next blah blah legend. How many fighters over the years, especially from the Ultimate Fighter, Duffy, you can probably work with me on this one more than everybody else, have been the next Anderson Silva? Like Felipe Nover, next Anderson Silva. Uriah Hall, next Anderson Silva. Exactly, and now we have the next Khabib Nurmagomedov yes, and it's unfortunate for those fighters that are automatically thrust into that discussion, because we shouldn't have to compare a 6-0 guy making his debut, smashing an overmatched Welshman, and being called the next undefeated 28-0, I believe this could be right now, champion. And yet we're already on that road. And to echo what Duffy said, there are knowledgeable people in the industry that are not trolling when they're saying, I'd love to see him fight a Jeff Neal, a Neil Magny, a ex top 15 fighter, that we don't need to waste time building him up. This is what he can do. Let's put him against the test. That's how you destroy a fighter. I mean, this guy is, how old is he?
20. I think he's like 27 or 28.
He's not in the, he's maybe in the prime of his career. He's 26. He turned 26 in May.
Okay.
8-0, and now he's finished everybody he's fought. But just the obsession of putting every fighter on the pedestal to be the next great, let them become their own great. Why does everybody need to be the next Conor McGregor? Let them be the next them. I don't know.
Think about how much Nurmagomedov himself benefited from being able to quietly develop in the UFC. Nobody paid much attention to the guy until he had won a half dozen fights.
Mm-hmm.
And that benefited him so much.
Yeah, I mean, we see that very commonly in boxing, to have a guy who, by the time you hear of him, he's already got 30 fights under his belt. It says a lot. It helps mold someone a whole lot more than just thrusting them into an immediate spotlight. Now, I'm forgive me if I'm going off on somewhat of a tangent here, but the hype surrounding this gentleman reminds me of someone whose hype was more warranted, but in the end ended up flaming out, and that's George Sotiropoulos, a guy who was considered one of the top guys at 155, who was going to challenge for the title and everything. He was, and he did all the right things up until when he started fighting the elite competition. So it's very easy to fall behind that 8 ball. Like, do not rush this man. Do not rush him. This is not going to be good for anyone involved. As an audience, if you want to see good fights, if you want to see the best that this man could possibly be, do not throw him in there with Neil Magny right now. No, it doesn't make any sense. Like, let these fighters develop. So I just want to get that one off my chest. And if we have any thoughts to wrap this up, we'll move on.
Shout out to George Sotiropoulos.
Yes.
Anytime we can make a reference to the 7-0 crushing talent that met Dennis Seaver and then everything went horribly wrong, shout out.
All right, well, let's go ahead and head into what probably was the biggest controversy over the event Saturday, and that was the unsanctioned bout between one Dan Hardy and one Herb Dean. So, gentlemen, who's right? Who's wrong?
Yes and
yes.
No.
Yes, this is a case where two things can both be wrong. It looks like that was a bad stoppage on Dean's part. Like, flat out. He looks like he blew it. That was a bad stoppage or a bad non-stoppage. But at the same time, and I know that Dean's response video that he released on Sunday has, been shared widely throughout the MMA media space, but he makes some good points. Mm-hmm. When he is in the cage doing his job, there are two people whose opinion and whose input he needs on when the fight should be stopped. There's the cage side doctor who, as he says, knows the human body better than he does. And there is the fighter's corner who presumably knows their man better than he does. And outside of that, people kind of need to stay in their lane. And particularly in the era of COVID, where everything the table says rings out super loud, to the point that we've had problems with them yelling out punch statistics in plain view of the judges and things like that. Dean made the point, what if I had thought that was the doctor? So yeah, like that was for Hardy, someone who was there in a different professional capacity, really needed to stay in his lane. And there's a difference between saying, for purposes of the broadcast, Herb really needs to stop this. This guy's done for. He's taking unnecessary punishment. And there's standing up at the table and just yelling at the referee, stop the fight. There's a huge difference there. And I think Hardy was very much out of line. Again, Hardy is someone who is there in a different professional capacity. For him to basically insinuate himself into the competitive process is not okay. And that's exactly what he was doing by yelling instructions to the ref in a largely empty arena.
Jay, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of a very similar mind. I think that Herb Dean should not have to deal with people yelling, hey, you need to stop the fight, because that's a very destructive thing, especially in a dead silent arena where Dan Hardy is a loud guy, and Hardy is like, wait, what? What do I have to do? But there is a big but here, because I want to dovetail off what Duffy said.
I like big butts.
Hey, I don't lie. So this is the kind of thing that starts the conversation that we need to have about officiating and refereeing. That I feel like confrontations like this need to happen in order to make somebody have an actual discussion about what happened. Think about what Dan Hardy did. Dan Hardy got Herb Dean to explain himself. He got Herb Dean to explain his decision. Now, that is something we do not have very often. And that, I think, should happen more often than it used to be. Back in the old days of the UFC, Rich G-Man Goins, that kind of era, would stick a microphone in John McCarthy's face and say, hey, what happened here? Or he would interview, he'd ask, Eve Levine, what happened there? And that, I think, is important, because there has to be some transparency in officiating and refereeing. And basically now there is not. Like, you think of the very famous instances of judges being questioned. Doug Crosby on his interview with Chael Sonnen, where it was a very strange interview. You guys might have heard this a long time ago, where Doug Crosby kind of laughs at him and says, I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have to answer to you. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're not a judge. You can't do this either. And there has to be some kind of answer. These referees have to be able to do something. I forget who posted it on Twitter on that fight night that said, 5 years to the day that Joe Lozon was pounding on Takanori Gomi, and he stopped the fight himself, stood up, walked away, and then Herb Dean called the fight because Gomi was just wasted. And people were like, oh, Herb Dean. I don't know what the steps are to quote sanctioning or punishing or rebuking a referee or judge for making a bad call, but I think there has to be some course of action. And what I want out of this discussion from what Dan Hardy did, to be able to open the door to that. And I think getting Herb Dean to explain himself, which, by the way, that was a good explanation of what he has to do, the steps he has to take. And you know what he did in that little answer? He taught a lot of people things they didn't know. A lot of new fans of the sport, a lot of people that would have no idea, because they watch a fight and they go, I know how to score it, but they don't think of what goes into it. You should stop the fight, but you don't think what goes into it. So this was a teachable moment. And Dan Hardy was in the wrong, but it is a net positive because of what came from it, I think.
I think you both raised some very good points here. I think there's right and wrong on both sides. Now, of course, let's get into the thing that is the most important, and that is the health and safety of the fighters. To see someone taking unnecessary punishment, and the one person who is there in the cage with the authority to end the proceedings not doing his job, yeah, there should be outrage there. There should be someone to hold them accountable. Now, I think Dan Hardy may have taken a more inappropriate route to that, but that inappropriate route only exists because referees typically don't have any accountability.
Yep.
If there was an avenue opened up to interviewing the referee right after the fight, as you alluded to a little bit earlier, Jay, would Hardy felt it was necessary to yell at Herb Dean in that moment? I don't think so. Because we know there will be some sort of actual professional venue for that to take place. There would be some part of the broadcast designated just for that. I'll give Herb Dean credit. Now, beyond the fact that obviously Dan Hardy and social media's outrage prompted his video response on I believe it was Instagram the other day. Herb Dean has been one of the more transparent referees that we've had. He's gone on Joe Rogan's show. He's done his own statements on things before, and he's kind of made his feelings about certain proceedings in refereeing known, and I would give him credit for that. But I will question this, though. He's considered one of the best referees in the sport through and through. A lot of people agree on this, but how many bad stoppages And how many bad calls does he have to make before we start questioning that status?
I think a lot of people are questioning it already.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is regarded as one of the best referees now just because he's one of the most experienced referees. And for a long time, he was relatively controversy free. I think his work of the last 6 or 7 years has not been up to his early standard, and he's kind of coasted on his reputation.
Yeah, I think that the part of a referee's reputation comes from their exposure, comes from them simply getting in the reps and getting X amount of fights. There was a time that Steve Mazzagatti was regarded as a top referee in both boxing and even kickboxing and MMA. And then we got to see more of him, and we changed our mind. I mean, he's still reffing. I've seen him ref kickboxing earlier, late last year, so he's still around. But I think just being there, being on the TV, and Herb Dean is a recognizable guy. So people go, "Oh, I like that Herb. Oh, Herb Dean's reffing. Oh, good." But my curiosity also turns back to something I will harp on until it's accepted as a norm. Jay Herbert's corner could have thrown in the towel because they saw their fighter laid out like this with his arms splayed out, not defending himself and whatever. So I think the corner also owed him that favor, and they didn't really do anything. But I will also notice one thing too: that ESPN and SportsCenter did not like that stoppage because they cut. It made the SportsCenter top 10, the top 10 broadcast thing. I think it was like number 8, where you got to see Trinaldo deck him, and he falls down and he's done, and then he kind of stands there, and that's it. They cut the footage. They don't see her being standing there. They don't see the Trinaldo going, "What am I going to do?" Punch, 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 punch. They cut all that off because they're like, "Oh, that's not a good look." So they just showed that big knockout. So yeah, people are noticing.
All right, well, fellas, let's go ahead and move on to so I'm sure we'll revisit this topic at some point, because I'm sure this won't be the last time, especially as COVID-19 cases are steadily rising in the United States, and the Apex Center may not be the safe haven it was a couple months back. But Fight Island, it's in the past now. Was it a success? Did Fight Island succeed, gentlemen?
In the confines and in the definition of putting on the event and keeping as few fighters and corners and staff members from this global pandemic that we're still kind of closing our eyes and going like this through, I think it succeeded, because just on its face, look at what happened on Monday for Major League Baseball about basically the Miami Marlins tested positive for the coronavirus effectively, and they're spreading it around. Cincinnati Reds, Atlanta Braves, just going around and around and around.
Similar stories in the NBA as well.
Yes.
And players leaving the bubble to go to the
strip club because that's fun.
Yeah. Oh.
And I think from the metric of these events happened, few fighters got sick in terms of the actual events themselves. Now, like Irene Aldana, I think that's a Vegas fight, so that didn't even matter. But they caught the fighters ahead of time before they would fly to Fight Island in the corners and whatever, and quarantine them well. So I think in that narrow regard, yes, well done, UFC. But in the scheme of things, boy, this whole sports in the pandemic thing is starting to get real dicey, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of raising up some of the issues that we were worried about originally, beyond our efforts to shut down the sport.
We're just trying to kill the sport, man. We're Greg Jacksons.
And now our mentality is spread to the NFL as well. So Ben, what were your thoughts on Fight Island? Did it come across as a successful venture in your opinion?
I think it did. There was some farcical and ridiculous, laughable stuff, but that's the UFC's aesthetic. They're always going to do some things that just kind of make you laugh. As soon as we found out that Fight Island was going to be in Abu Dhabi, we were like, okay, that's the most UFC thing ever. Mm-hmm. But what were their goals going in? Keep the fights coming, come hell or high water. We'll mark that one accomplished. Obviously, they believe, but I think they believe correctly, that their business model is built off of making stars. Check the box. And in terms of doing it as safely as possible and or giving the outward impression of doing it as safely as possible, the UFC's precautions regarding COVID got a lot of flack early on, and rightly so. It was a mess. It was inconsistently observed, inconsistently enforced. They do seem gradually to be getting their act together. And it is very rare that MMA comes out looking better than Major League stick and ball sports, especially in things regarding regulation, safety, stuff like that. So credit where credit is due. This was a success. The UFC knows that far more eyes are on the sport than usual just because of the dearth of other avenues of sports entertainment. And they're stepping up to the plate so far. I have to give credit.
And looking at the UFC, because UFC is pretty much the lone major organization that had been running to this point. We're getting one championship. We got Bellator back this weekend. LFA has been kind of stuck in South Dakota and so on and so forth. But the UFC has been kind of pushing that path. Then you look at another combat sport, like, I don't know, boxing, Top Rank. Have you guys been paying attention to what's been happening to Top Rank? Basically, every one of their last so-and-so cards has had COVID-related stuff. Mostly headliners. I seem to recall, like, what was it? 3 of the last 5 headliners fell out because of COVID, because nobody seems to know what to do to handle that. So just comparatively speaking, because Top Rank is an ESPN broadcasting property like the UFC, you look at those two stand next to each other and go, boy, Top Rank fell apart because the headliner fell off and this and that and this and that. UFC is keeping on trucking for the most part. So that's a win in their books too. I got to think that Dana takes all every time that we get a little notification in the Sherdog Slack boxing channel that so-and-so main event fell off because of COVID. Dana's just like, just putting a little name on that tombstone that has affliction and WFA on it.
Slowly but surely spelling out the name Bob Arum. All right. So speaking of boxing, I mean, we got to talk about this. It's going to take place in the Los Angeles area, so perhaps I'll dust off my credentials to go ahead and see this in person here. But Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., September 12th. 8 rounds of exhibition action. Why are we doing this?
Mike Tyson was openly smoking a blunt while he signed his contract.
Mm-hmm.
That sets the stage for the whole thing. This is something that is conceived and is going to be brought to pass just like the wild idea of somebody who's way too baked. There's no reason for this. It's a fight that could have happened legitimately at some points. Tyson was never a huge heavyweight. Jones, as he got older, he fought as heavy as heavyweight.
Yeah, he fought Ruiz.
Yeah, like he fought a championship level fighter at heavyweight. He was nowhere near his best self. But there was a time when these two guys might have intersected. And it might have been of mild historical interest at that time. At this time, it is not. It is just pure farce and spectacle.
I actually wanted to see Roy Jones and Mike Tyson fight around that time. And I remember so many conversations with my dad about, like, this fight needs to happen. It was right after Jones beat Ruiz, which was one of his finest performances. Mm-hmm. For him to win the heavyweight belt. And granted, Ruiz wasn't exactly the creme de la creme of heavyweight champions at the time, but he went up to heavyweight and beat a legit guy and beat him badly. And Tyson was just still in the fringes of doing what he was doing at the time. So it just seemed like a perfect fight. Money-wise for both of them, style-wise, it'd have been a great fight. This now just feels really, really strange. Like, and especially it being framed as a sparring match. I guess the way they're trying to put this, there's not going to be headgear. Nope. So that's direct from Andy Foster, the CSAC director that there's not going to be headgear. They're going to wear, I think, 12-ounce gloves.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know what to think about this, but I guess we're getting them fighting. But I'll say this: if you think that they're going to go in there and just play patty cake with one another, you've got another thing coming. Do you think Mike Tyson, who tried his best to completely annihilate the man we know and love as Rafael Cordero for an Instagram video, do you think this man is going to get in the ring and decide, oh, I'm going to play around with the person in front of me? And do you think Roy Jones, who was competing as recently as about 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not, it wasn't like 2017, I think was last time he fought.
Yeah.
Do you think he's not?
It was more absurd than that. It was like a year and a half ago.
Roy Jones Jr., who during the absolute peak of his fight career was also playing semi-pro basketball and recording rap albums because he is just that competitive and that driven to win at everything.
Yeah, like, do you think that guy who was on Pros versus Joes beating the dog shit out of
I forgot about
Me
that.
too.
Plumber?
He beat the brakes off of those guys.
Do you think that guy is going to stand in front of Tyson and not try to win? Like, come on now. I want to beat it when it happens, though.
I mean, I was not into it until we had this discussion. I'll be very, very plain about this. Because now that I'm picturing it in this different light, this has all the makings of a sparring match where both guys are a little too aggressive and a little too competitive and go, well, I'm going to know that I was 60%. I'm going to give them 65%. And it's going to gradually turn up and get way out of hand to the coaches. Whoa, 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 whoa. What are you guys doing? Hang on. This is a sparring match. Like this has like a
Creed versus Drago type exhibition.
Yeah, I mean,
this is supposed to be an exhibition.
Yes, this feels to me like something bad's gonna happen. Like, what was it? Andy Foster came out and it's like, yeah, we're just to let you guys know, this is a performance. This isn't a fight. And I'm like, oh boy, this is great. But then I think Tyson doesn't really, act. I mean, like, I have the feeling when he filmed Ip Man 3, he probably got into a couple actual fights with the stars when he was filming that thing. I want it to go off the rails. I mean, let's not forget Tyson's last fight in 2005. He lost 2 points for headbutting the guy in his retirement fight. He headbutted that dude.
It was a horrible.
Yes,
it was. He looked completely washed in that fight. It was terrible.
And he was still winning it.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't he just sit on the ropes?
Yeah.
To forfeit.
And on the scorecards, he was winning. I think he was winning on one, if not two, of the scorecards at the time. After losing 2 points to a headbutt, because he's Tyson, and he was just kind of hanging out, having a good time. It was 15 years later. He's got a weed farm and he's having a nice time, dude. Full blast Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. at 50 years old. Let's get weird. I want it now because I don't care. Because here's the thing: there are no stakes. It's not bragging rights. There's no, unless they make like
health, that's all.
Well, whatever. But this is Mike Tyson we're talking about. I don't think one more mess of a match with a blown up cruiserweight is going to make a big difference. But this is Roy Jones Jr. You almost have forgot. Okay, September 12th is going to come, and we're going to sit there and we're going to go, man, I have a UFC to cover. Screw that. I got to watch this fight because it's Mike Tyson. But we're not going to feel good. But I want it to go wrong. I want it to go horribly wrong. Andy Foster to have to apologize after the fight that he didn't know that it was supposed to be a fight. That's what I want to happen. Like, there needs to be an apology at the end of the night, and then that is a huge success.
It's one of those things where, like, only the sick part of my brain really wants this to happen.
Yes.
But I'm totally okay with that.
I just turned that sick part off.
Yeah, this is one of those instances where it's like, all right, whatever. If we're gonna go all out, go all out. I mean, we can look at it this way. At least it's two men who are of similar age, similar experience, that are gonna go in there. They're equally washed, and they can go in there and whatever happens, as opposed to some of the foolishness that popped up on the time. Probably some of the same fools that think your man who just fought on 10 days notice is going to go in there and challenge Usman next. Some of those same people were saying after watching Tyson hit pads that, oh, he can beat Tyson Fury. So, I mean, at least we're not seeing that. We're not seeing the real life Rocky Balboa movie where Rocky fights Mason the Lion Dixon. Like that's not happening. So it's two guys. It's Rocky and Drago rematching or whatever, as opposed to what we saw in that movie, which I'm okay with. Like, if it's two old guys fighting, I mean, we crack on the Bellator senior circuit all the time, but this is essentially what this is. And when you pair them up like that, I can't be but so mad because, hey, they're in it for the same things. All right, fellas. So now let's move on to the greatest title segment in all of media history, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where we share something that surprised us or didn't surprise us about the fights, the pre-fight coverage, the fights themselves, post-fight coverage, or any related combat sport news. So, Jay, I'll begin with you. What is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, this rolled in on Monday, so this is quite a not a breaking story because we've known about it for several hours now, but it's something that kicked in there and had made some headlines. Did you guys know that Gilbert Melendez was still on the UFC roster? Because he's not, but he was last year, and then he wasn't anymore. Now, the reason this is of import is because Gilbert Melendez, former title challenger, former Strikeforce champion, husband to Bellator superstar Kerry Melendez. Anyway, he popped again. He tested positive for growth hormones, I think, and some long string of chemical formula. And he tests positive, and he says, yeah, it's in my system, but why I'm upset about this happening is because you didn't have the right to test me. Now, that shook me more than it should, because when he's trying to make that kind of legal argument, me as an attorney looking at the way he's approaching it, to say, I definitely had these artificial growth hormones surging through my system, but you didn't have the right to test me, that's his argument. That's not a great argument when you're still on the UFC roster. And circling back to what I said is because he was released in November, tested positive in October 2019. So we're maybe, it's the kind of thing the UFC finds out a fighter tests positive and releases them. That happens sometimes. When Gilbert Melendez explained it as such and said, you just didn't have the jurisdiction to test me. That you can't do this. What are you doing? You can't test me right now. I am the law, kind of thing. The Gary Hart, follow me around and you're not going to see anything happen. It calls into question, for me, his career, because to be this cavalier about taking very serious artificial enhancements, and this being his second positive test, to the way he responded makes me wonder. And I don't ever want to have to wonder about that about an old fighter. I want to have the willing suspension of disbelief. I want to believe that pride fighters other than Bob Sapp and Mark Kerr and other names that have dealt with it in the past, they could, but they didn't have to. I want to believe that because I'm a Sapp. But this calls into question for me Gilbert's legacy as a fighter. Makes me wonder, was he on the gear during his Strikeforce run, which was better? Because let's be honest, guys, he tested positive in the UFC twice. He won one fight. He has more positive tests than positive fight results. So it hurts my heart, and I don't know. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. This is an I'm Not Surprised section. We're supposed to go one at a time. Do you think this hurts Melendez's legacy in any way? Duffy, you can take a crack at it first.
It really doesn't, to me, any more than it makes me wonder whether Anderson Silva was on PEDs the whole time. That's it. I've always had a little bit of a renegade view towards PEDs. In general, I don't really care whether all the fighters are on them or none of the fighters are on them. I don't have any illusions of a quote clean sport. I just want all the fighters to meet the same standard. Like, the standard is not that you don't take drugs. The standard is that you put clean pee into a cup on demand. That's as far as we can govern this. And for that reason, during the time that he was one of the top 5 lightweights in the world for quite a long time before his UFC run. It doesn't really call that into question for me. And even outside of the legalistic and rhetorical, twists and turns that I'm taking here, I honestly, I'm not sure whether he was. He might have just been the guy that felt he needed an extra boost as he got into his 30s, and his particularly physically demanding style of fighting, he was starting to lose that top gear. I mean, that would be my opinion, but what I stick to is, no, it doesn't really affect his legacy for me.
Well, thanks for that, Ben Luke Duffy. Now, I can't say I fully disagree with you though, simply because like you look at when these positive tests started coming around, and this is definitely on the downside of his career. Now, granted, he probably wasn't under the strictest of testing throughout his Strikeforce days, and certainly not when he fought in Japan.
Yeah, Dream didn't have a very notorious drug testing regimen.
Yeah, they weren't exactly checking for the gear there, but I do think we have to extend some leeway in that case, because, like you said, a physically demanding style. He's aging, and yeah, you're probably more likely to put substances in your body at that point in time, or at least get caught for them. So it is what it is. It's sort of like looking back at past stars and questioning their legacies. But it certainly makes me think back to Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz jaw-jacking at each other at the press conference ahead of 196, and McGregor just went, "Your whole team's on steroids."
I mean,
Mystic Mac did it again. I guess I don't know, man. Yeah, Gilbert Melendez, man, is still going to go down as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. If you think that he was juiced up and Josh Thompson wasn't, I'm sorry. Like, you're clearly not paying attention, and I'm not accusing Josh Thompson directly of juicing, but I think we know the rogue nature of the sport and what mix drug testing throughout different promotions and athletic commissions of varying levels of tolerance or give a fuck who actually actually put into this. Like, we know what this is. This is just the past coming back to haunt the USADA future of the sport. It is what it is, man. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. But Ben, can you share with us your "I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons" moment?
Sure. And it's fitting that we have been talking about Roy Jones Jr. and his signature jam, because Fabricio Werdum might as well start walking out to Y'all Must Have Forgot. It must have been a pretty insulting feeling for him to come into Saturday's card as like a 2-1 underdog to a less accomplished fighter from the next smaller weight class, moving up for the first time, who had retired in dejected fashion in the cage less than a year ago. Like, in spite of all of that hanging over Gustafsson's head, Werdum was the substantial underdog. And obviously it was a reaction to how bad he had looked in May against Oleinik. Just, he looked listless. He'd been gone for 2 years because of a USADA suspension. He looked very post-USADA, if I may say. But the thing is, Fabricio Werdum has always been prone to very wide variances in terms of his preparation, fitness, and therefore his in-ring or in-cage performance. The difference between good Werdum and bad Werdum is a wide, wide ocean, but it typically only affects him on the feet. He is like the same guy who just calmly, pieces up Cain Velasquez or kills Mark Hunt with a flying knee, is also the same guy who will walk into a rear hand uppercut from a 6', 12 man in Alexander Volkov, or just stand in front of Andrei Arlovsky for 6 rounds doing nothing, or, start butt scooting against Alistair Overeem. You never know what you're going to get on the feet. On the ground, you always know what you're getting. He is pretty easily the greatest heavyweight grappler in mixed martial arts history, and maybe the greatest heavyweight grappler of all time if you factor in his gi, no gi, and MMA legacy. He might be it. In a sport where we throw around the term world class too easily sometimes, it was nice to be reminded, because once they hit the ground, just the agility for a huge man who, good Werdum or bad Werdum, looks kind of hinky on the feet. As soon as they hit the ground, just the agility, the economy of movement, that proprioception, just that instinctive knowledge of where your body is positioned in relation to your opponent. Once I hit the ground, I think he could have finished the fight blindfolded. And it was a treat to see. It is nice to see actual world-class skills on display in the Octagon. And it was a reminder that even though the man turns 43 in a couple days, he still has something to offer the heavyweight division. So I was surprised, it should not have been, Mr. Falcons, that Fabricio Werdum is still a serious problem on the ground.
Well, definitely some good points you brought up there, Ben. And that leads me to my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment. And that's the flip side of the coin, Alexander Gustafsson. So kind of I couldn't say I was very surprised by the results of the fight for a couple of reasons. One, being submitted by Fabricio Werdum is the fate that a lot of people are gonna be let down, especially when you've been submitted in the past by smaller, less accomplished grapplers. I mean, his last fight before Saturday, he got submitted by Anthony Smith. He was controlled completely on the ground in the John Jones rematch. So you got two fights in a row where he did not look the best on the ground. And then you get him in against perhaps the best heavyweight ground specialist the sport has ever seen. And the results are the results. But also, too, this move for Alexander Gustafsson, I think we came with some sort of excitement to see him at heavyweight. A guy who's so lanky and lean and whatnot. Now you see him at heavyweight with the rolls hanging over his trunks. And it didn't look like an optimal version of Alexander Gustafsson from a fitness standpoint. So you combine that with the clear deficiencies against the jiu-jitsu of Fabricio Werdum, and I'm not surprised by those results. So there's my moment.
He's no Jake Collier, though.
All right. So let's go ahead and move it along here to the speed bag. And this is where I get to flex my authority on you mofos. So I'm going to put 10 seconds on the clock. You gentlemen will have said time to answer several questions. So let's go ahead and get that volume up so you can hear that bell. So first question. How do you feel about Darren Till walking out to total silence instead of Sweet Caroline? And Jay, you're up first.
I gotta say, first thing I thought of was you and Matt Weld going, thank God we don't have to hear that stupid song, but I love the choice.
Ben.
I will take total silence over that damn song any day of the week.
Good man. Good man. I love you, Ben. All right. Now, let's move on to the next question. Should Alexander Gustafsson stay at heavyweight after his loss to Werdum? Ben, you are up first.
Yes, if he's serious about continuing to fight, he could do some work on his body and reinvent himself as a good heavyweight still. This isn't the end.
Jay.
I think he should actually have a plan, and if he's going to move to heavyweight, because otherwise he's going to look like a mess like that.
All right, fair point there. All right, so Jay, this next question will start with you. Did Bellator 242 convince you that the promotion is back, or do you think they need a blockbuster card to bring the point home? You have 10 seconds.
This felt like the kind of card, can we run it? Can we make this happen? Can we pull this off? They did. They had mixed results. It was fine, but we need something big.
All right, Ben.
I'm fine with this. I'm not begging for another 22 fight Bellator card. This had everything I need from Bellator, compacted into a nice short card. I'm happy.
All right, good. So now I'm going to change the clock to 30 seconds, and I will answer all three questions. The clock will start after reading the first question. How did you feel about Darren Till walking out to total silence instead of Sweet Caroline? That was by far my favorite part of the card. I dread every time Darren Till is added to a fight card that I got to hear that God forbidden song. And thank you, Darren. You're now my favorite fighter. So Alexander Gustafsson should stay at heavyweight. Just lift some weights, stop eating the hot dogs, and go ahead and give it a good shot. And Bellator 242, convincing Bellator is back. I mean, did we notice when Bellator was in full swing anyway? This was just a regular Bellator card. It's back. It's cool. All right.
I want to give an alternate answer to the second question about Alex. I think Alex should fight other fighters that are making the uncertain move to heavyweight. John Vellante, Jay Collier. There's been a couple other names that are like, I don't know if I should make this move up. Because then Ilir Latifi, because then he can't fight Ilir because they're teammates. But former light heavyweights bridging that gap because there's no cruiserweight.
Yeah, not a bad idea at all. I mean, even if he took a catchweight fight, know, to kind of ease his way into it, but to jump in there against Werdum, and when you're looking that physically unprepared, just didn't seem right at all to me. All right, fellas. So let's see. We're starting to wind things down here. Did I lose? Oh, they're about to say I'm about to lose my outline, but I just moved the window and I did something stupid. But anyway, it's back up on my screen. So we've got a few smaller shows this weekend. Invicta is putting on the card. One championship returns, and the LFA is doing a show as well. So out of the smaller cards, just give me quickly one fight that you're looking forward to. I'll start with you, Ben.
There are only 2 MMA fights on the one championship card, but I'm excited to see Stamp Fairtex anytime they want to roll her out and have her do her thing. They need stars. She is one. So if they want to just keep feeding her winnable fights and let her, do her little boogie, I'll watch it.
All right. What about you, Jay?
I think of all the fights that stick out, the LFA's main event, Bryce Logan and Jacob Rosales is interesting to me because of the stakes of that fight. I feel like this is the fight that it will probably put somebody either on the Contender Series, again, for Rosales' for his worth, or a short notice opportunity to call up for 155er.
If those guys lived in Europe, they both would have been pulled on to fight Island to replace somebody.
Absolutely, and that's the top thing about the division, especially division, because of the lightweights. There's such a shark tank at that division. Rosales fought in last year's Contender Series, and he got knocked out. And he looked, if I remember correctly, he looked pretty good until then, and then he obviously got clipped. But it just tells me that this is one of those LFA fights where you're like, yeah, I know the winner of this fight is going to probably go to the UFC or the Contender Series. Like last week, Crystal Vanessa Demopoulos beat Sam Hughes. Wouldn't you know it? Crystal Vanessa Demopoulos is on the second week of the Contender Series.
All right.
I like seeing those future people in those fights to be like, this is the star-making fight. So I like that one.
All right. I mean, I can't really say that there's any one particular fight that jumps off the pages to me for any of these smaller shows. But I'm always kind of got one eye on Invicta simply because the UFC is poaching anybody who wins a fight on that card. So Aaron Blanchfield or Brogan Walker Sanchez, who's going to the UFC with the win? I mean, that's kind of what that feels like to me. So especially at a division flyweight, which the UFC clearly has a serious gap as far as the amount of bodies on the roster.
Move your phone off the table.
Oh, my phone just. Oh, yeah.
Woo.
Oh, yeah. I got to stop doing that. All right, but yeah, that's my pick simply because I anticipate the winner of this fight getting a call up. Now, of course, let's go ahead and in the show tonight, or this afternoon, or this morning, whenever you're watching this in YouTube land. But the UFC is back at the Apex Center. The main event is going to feature Derek Brunson and Edmund Shabazian. So throw one at you real quick, Jay. Joanne Calderwood is taking on Jennifer Maia on this card. Do you think she's squandering a potential title shot here?
Yeah, I think this is the worst fight that she could take in the division outside of rematching Caitlin Chukagian, I think, to keep it going, to be in contendership for a flyweight title shot. Like, this is the kind of fight that Maia, who is a big physical flyweight, will grab hold of her and grind her out because JoJo likes to get space, give her Muay Thai, her knees and elbows off, and Maia will just stick to her like glue and will make everybody really depressed because there goes one more potential challenger to the division at flyweight. And why is that Why is it up in smoke? Because Jennifer Maia can't make weight. So what's going to happen very possibly is we'll have a fighter that misses weight and comes in at 128, 129, 131, and wins a fight and knocks off a contender and places themselves no closer to the title shot in a division that is crying for challengers. So I think this does not behoove Joanne Calderwood at all.
All right. So Jay, give me one fight that you're looking forward to on this card. Of course, outside of Bobby Green versus Lando.
Oh, damn it.
Because everyone wants to see that one.
Vicente Luque is like a minus 150 favorite against Randy Brown. I have no idea how this is that close of a fight in terms of the odds so far, but Randy Brown's a tough dude. I mean, Randy Brown, he beat Mickey Gall, so he's legit. No, I'm kidding. He beat Worley Alves, and he, he's done well so far. He got smoked by Nico Price with the upside down, the on his back hammer fists, but he's got some potential. But Vicente Luque, this to me is a showcase fight, but it'll be fun until it gets there, I think.
Ben, what's one of the fights you're looking forward to the most on this?
Well, he stole the one that was the most obvious to me, but I'm excited for Calderwood versus Maia. Just, I think everybody except Calderwood should be. I would love if she is just playing like 4D chess here and she's banking on Maia to miss weight, just collect her show money and say I'm not fighting her. Just basically pick up a check while she waits for that title shot. But
wow.
That check will pay for the training camp, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't know how she's going to do that because John Warren has COVID, so that's a whole weird thing. Anyway.
Well, one fight that I'm looking forward to. My first instinct was Vicente Luque versus Randy Brown, but I'm gonna go further down on the card. Jamal Emmers versus Timur Valiev. I'm really looking forward to this one. Emmers looked great in what ended up being a losing effort against Giga Chikadze. Man, I'm terrible at pronouncing these names, but you know who I'm talking about. Like Emmers looked really, really good in that fight, and had that gone on just a little bit longer, I think the momentum was swinging in his favor. I'm very curious to see what he's going to look like here. Now, I don't know much about Timur, but we know he's making his UFC debut. We know that the region that he comes from is quite famous for smothering grapplers. If that is the style that's brought in there against Emmers, it'd be very interesting to see how he handles that. That's a style that's kind of stifled a lot of people with Emmers' skill set. So I want to know if this is something that he can handle from a style perspective. So that's probably the one that I'm looking forward to the most outside of the higher name fights on that card, but should be a good one overall. But that right there should do it for this edition of Unleashed. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Jay, for jumping on here and entertaining these good folks. You can find their work on Sherdog.com. You can find them on social media through the handles that are right below us there. And you can find my work on MMA On Point, My MMA News, and The Body Lock. So you know what you got to do. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. And stay beautiful, stay positive, stay with your mask on, and most of all, stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace. Feel like yelling.